A lot of people, when they start out in nature or landscape photography, want to have a proper camera with an expensive lens to create more beautiful photos. But what they don't realize is, and what I didn't realize at that time either, was how powerful a phone can be. I think a lot of times the problem with using a phone for landscape or nature photography is that we think the photos just don't end up well. So I wanted to make this video to kind of highlight the type of nature and landscape photography I'm able to do with my phone in my local area. What I'm going to show you next is recorded during times around my work. So either earlier morning before work or after work and out on a walk. And what I want to really emphasize is how I try and take photos with just my phone camera, and how I think about composition, how I think about observation and trying to identify subjects of interest, even in my local area. And using the skills that you develop in your local areas, you'll be much better placed to start taking photos of wider, grander landscape and be able to move on to a better camera when you realize the limitations of just having a phone camera. There are places where phone camera just won't do justice. You'll see in some of the pictures that I take that the phone camera has quality issues with it, as well as limitations in the type of photos that I can take. And so along the way, I will try and explain how the environment and the phone and its limitations work well together in some instances and don't work well together to create the photos that I'm able to create at that time. Oh wow. This is such an amazing view. I didn't think that I would want to take any photos this morning because the sun wasn't out, but just landed in the middle of the fog. Morning. It is beautiful. The islands, the separation. I came here once before when it was pretty much, I guess, barren. Like, there were no leaves. But this is much more different. Alright, so when trying to take a photo with my phone, this is the view that I'm seeing right now. It's really nice, really calm and serene, and I think the composition that I can go for is because of the reflection in the water and it's pretty white on top, pretty white on the bottom, I can use that to ensure that I have a symmetrical composition. I do have to be careful of these trees over here because it just makes it out of balance. So I could try to crop in even further later on to remove these leaves on the side and get only these. If I try a vertical composition, that actually looks pretty neat as well. But what I want to do is I want to make sure that when I do take, for example, this photo, there is this little separation between the darker greens and the lighter greens. And to really make sure that I have balance on both sides, I want to make sure I end my photo at least on the lighter side. So let me move around here, which will actually let me increase the separation a little bit more. Now, even though I have darker greens on the left side, because a lot of the interesting stuff is on the right side, because of that tall island or the island with the tall trees, the photo I think is still pretty balanced. Let's see if I can move a little bit further, what I can get here. Now, if I had optical zoom, I could do something like this, but I don't really have optical zoom on this phone. A lot of other phones, like the iPhone, have optical zoom for different focal lengths. Let's do a digital zoom. Right, that photo works really well. So, love the fog moving across. And the reason this works so well with the phone camera is because those things are pretty close up to me and I don't need to worry about the details being lost because I want my main subject to stand out. And with a phone camera, if you don't have focal lengths that extend the optical zoom much further, you're going to end up with a small subject unless it's very close up. So this is a pretty interesting composition here, or at least a pretty interesting view. I think the subject I want is the bridge, and that leads into the fog and the forest behind. And because the fog is right there, it kind of creates a neat little layering effect between the trees, the fog, and the trees. But the question is, how do I want to kind of compose this part and make sure that the subject still stands out? Because I want to make sure that the water isn't too prominent. I want it to be there, obviously, but I don't want it to be the main focus. If it's too big, then it won't have the same effect that I want. I know there's a little bit of reflection going on, so that might help minimize the vastness of the water. So let's see. If I do a horizontal composition like this, the tree in the center just stands out too much, which I don't particularly like. I want the tree to act more as a frame. There are trees at the top too that will act as a frame. If I do a little bit higher up, the tree actually starts to look a little bit less intrusive, just because I don't see the stump anymore, and it acts a little bit as a frame now. I don't have the effect of the ground. I think the ground just adds a little bit too much emphasis on that tree trunk. I also move out on the bench, which actually isn't too bad because it also draws a little bit more attention than I would like. So let's try to remove the bench entirely if I can. Now if I try to go for a vertical shot, I think the trees now do act more as a frame to the bridge in the back. If I can get a little bit closer, maybe that effect will be a little bit more pronounced. I like getting a little bit closer, but now I lose the framing effect of the branches at the top. Just trying to see if I can find an interesting composition. There's just too much light here, and there's not a strong enough subject as well. Let's keep working. Right now, just trying to see if anything pops out to me. Kind of like patterns or any sort of interesting placement of trees. There's a lot of, I guess, trees interspaced with water around here. So I wanted to focus on trying to create a nice balance between that. The light isn't that good. It's very cloudy, but that also means that it's probably going to be more diffused. I'm not going to get any of the nice orange glow of sunset, but maybe I can find a balanced, simple composition then instead. The problem with taking a picture of something like that over there is it's too far away, and there's not a strong enough subject. Now, this house or this building right here could be a strong enough subject, and if I could, I guess, use the reflection maybe of the house and use a strong enough foreground, maybe something like this. No, not strong enough of a foreground. Maybe something over here. I like these, but they're still not strong enough. Alright, let's go further in. But I think that's where I'm going to find some of the more intimate compositions. Oh yeah, I like this space. I like the water over here, and then if I can connect the water to the back over there and have this island in the between, I think the shapes of the trees really stand out to me. But let's see. It is a little bit unbalanced because I think there's too much density of the trees on this side. So if I can create like a sweeping motion of the grass leading to the back and then going forward. So instead of the water flowing, it's more about the land and the grass kind of flowing instead. Let's see. There is a little bit too much sky though, so I'm trying to block that out. Maybe I'll reduce the exposure a little bit. It's not a strong enough of a composition. Let me just take it anyways. Let's keep looking. Interesting. So these roots down here, I think, make for an interesting foreground, but the sky just adds a little bit too much. Alright, let's keep moving on. Okay, so there's kind of a enclave, empty space around here. I wouldn't be able to make a good image out of this. I think it looks neat, but then when you start to take a photo, you can see that there's just so much bright spots in here. And unless you zoomed in on something, and even now I can't really find something particular to zoom in on. I don't think this by itself makes a good composition. Let's go. So really beautiful area, but it doesn't really have a strong enough composition that I can work with. There's not a lot of interesting light, and because it's just too dark, the colors of the leaves and the branches and the trees kind of blend together. Most of the time, if I'm walking just like this for the sake of walking rather than photography, I am still constantly on the lookout for interesting subjects. And that's why I'm using my phone instead of my actual camera, because most of the time I just have my phone on me rather than my camera. And I want to be able to compose and observe, and it really makes the walking and the immersion in nature much more intentional. So I do enjoy it a lot more. Now, if I am with someone else while I'm walking, then yeah, it's kind of a little bit more difficult. So really good exercise to do when you're out there alone and just taking a walk. As you can see, probably, there's not a lot going on over here. I could try and take a picture of this, right? But there's not strong enough subject or composition. I don't think the branches of the trees work well in the direction that they are, and they're just too, I guess, dense of leaves where there's not enough interesting lighting to separate and create the depth that I'm looking for. And it'll just appear a little bit flat. Oh, that's interesting. I like the light of the sky in the reflection. That's pretty cool. So I liked this tree over there. It has really interesting branches kind of sprouting from the bottom, and because I can see the reflection, I think I might be able to create an interesting photo from it. The tree itself is pretty neat. The leaves are kind of interspersed, it's not very bushy. They kind of create an interesting photo because you can see the bark and you can see the leaves, which are a little bit lighter, but they work well together because the leaves aren't overcrowding the bark. But again, yeah, with this, you just can't get really good photos with a phone for a photo like that. It's just too far away. And the subject is too far away. If I could have something in between that would leave there, I think it could work well, but the reflection isn't strong enough to kind of act as a leading point. It's more interesting as a symmetrical composition, which means that you would treat both the subject and the reflection as the same plane rather than it being the foreground and the background. At least I tend to think of it that way. And with a phone, you just don't have anything kind of in between. So it seems like with a phone, you really do need something interesting going on in between, or you need a strong enough subject that stands out much more than this tree kind of currently does against the background, and maybe with some better light. But I think even with this light it looks pretty nice because the leaves are lighter than the leaves around it. Okay, so that's the tree I spotted. I don't know if you can see it from here, but yeah, no, there's just too much sky in this picture. I wouldn't even be able to pick out this tree if I was the main subject, if I was just taking a look at this photo. So yeah, it's not going to work too well. It's a pity because that is a pretty neat tree. It stands out by itself. And the leaves are okay. It's not the best photo. Maybe I'd give it a 3 out of 5 if I could take it. But yeah, even with a phone, I think it's not even a 2 out of 5. So I noticed these white flowers, and because there's just a lot of vegetation behind them, I think they do stand out pretty well. Now I'm trying to find an interesting cluster of them, so that when they are co-located with one another, they tend to create a stronger composition, because just taking a picture of one of them is not going to be strong enough. Even 2 of them, not strong enough. 3 of them would work well, but the composition and the positioning just doesn't work too well. That's an interesting photo. So, didn't really use the rule of odds, but I think this just stands out against these 3 over here, which are kind of joined together. So it does have an interestingly balanced photo feel to it, and I do like the leaf stem kind of going from the bottom up into the center. Very stormy. I see the clouds over there already having the nice glow from the sun, but I'm just waiting for the sun to go beneath the clouds and really light it up. I like this open field because I see a couple of trees over there that are pretty interesting. So that one over there, this tree has some really nice trunks as well, and if the light falls on it, I can really make it pop out a lot more than the trees behind it. Well, let's see what type of image I can get right now. Yeah, right now, not too good, because I can't really make it stand out. There's just too much going on around it. Even though the sky is pretty amazing, there's just too much in front of it. So maybe I have to go a little bit closer. But this image, I think, would do much better if there was better light. So, might have to wait for the light a little bit. I think by itself, the clouds are really beautiful, and it's very tempting to just take a picture of that, right? I think you want to be able to just take a picture of the vastness of the clouds. Maybe they're making an interesting shape, or the colors are about to come out, but at the end of the day, that's not going to be a very meaningful picture. At least I don't find it very meaningful. I'm never going to want to look at it again, because I just won't have the same level of intentionality to it. I won't have composed it well. I won't have interacted with the actual environment to create that photo, and I know I'll just want to take it because I want to take the photo of something beautiful. But if that photo isn't composed well, it's just not going to end up working out in the long run. Very cool trees. Right now I'm just trying to find a good vantage point because I want to get the gnarliness of this tree, but I want to be able to use the advantages of this camera phone, which are basically the wide angleness. Just taking a look around, seeing what type of compositions I can fit into this, paying attention to the branches, paying attention to the light in the sky, because I think that's going to be really difficult to navigate out of it. Oh, I like this. If the sun was like right there in between, I think this would make for a great photo. I do like the tree in the back over here. I think that really adds to this and makes it a little bit more multi-dimensional. Now the light here is a little bit too much. Maybe if a cloud was there, or Yeah, let me reduce the exposure. And I can always get some light back from there, but I don't want the highlights to be blown out. I hope these videos show you how I think about photography with the limitations of the different types of camera, right? Even if I'm using a proper camera, there's still going to be limitations there. And so when I'm limited with just my phone camera, I am still thinking about all the compositional details, all the ways I can enhance the image. And so those principles that I still apply when I'm using my proper camera apply well when I'm just using my phone as well. But more than that, I hope you were able to grasp the thought process I go through when I am looking out for these photos. And a lot of times those photos just don't work well, as you've probably seen. A lot of times I'm looking around and there's nothing there to actually photograph, or at least nothing there that immediately grabs my attention. If you enjoyed this video, or if you want to see something similar like this but with some different aspects, let me know in the comment below and I'll try to make videos more like that as well. Alright, I'll see you next time. Bye.